All right, the Manning cast, which I really enjoyed, and I no longer watch and haven't really watched at all, one iota since week 4. And I figure the next day, if anything happened, I can consume it with a nice, spicy 90-second clip. I was in a firsthand situation with this where the Pats were playing on a Monday night against the Bills. The Manning cast was going on. It never even occurred to me to watch the Manning cast. It was my team. I wanted to watch the normal way without conversations distracting me. And in general, like it felt like more of a gimmick as the season went along. It was cool at the beginning, at least for me. And then I think it would have these moments, but ultimately, I hate to say this about myself, but the traditional, I don't even really like the Greasy Riddick Levy crew that much. It's fine. It's like a C plus B minus, but it was just easier to follow the game with those guys. And ultimately, I just want to watch football and I want to know what's happening and who did what. And I don't want to be sidetracked by the things. I think it's good that the Manning cast exists. I think it was smart. It probably is going to do way better on ESPN2 than anything else they had. But I think I've altered my position a little bit on, is this going to change sports media and how we do broadcasts? What do you think after a whole season of it, Bryan Curtis?
I put the brakes certainly on, will it change everything about sports television? And I don't think I ever quite thought that, just because the talent of those guys is so different. I totally disagree with you, though. I've actually liked it more, and I get disappointed when they're not on. And to me, it's actually, the surprise has been, it's really easy to follow the game on the Manning cast. And the reason is that Peyton Manning is a play-by-play guy and an analyst and joking around with Eli and interviewing people at the same time. Like, I find if you go back to both telecasts, often Peyton and Eli are setting the stakes of a particular play, of a third down or big fourth down in the fourth quarter, as well as or better than the guys on the other broadcast. And that's what's so shocking to me, because we're used to this as kind of like a conversation and we're having fun and we're doing X's and O's, but Peyton is sitting there and he's kind of doing play-by-play, and he's kind of doing it well, a lot better than I expected. And I've watched the regular telecast, and there have been fourth quarters where they've really screwed up game-winning drives and have not been good and have been off topic or messing up and stuff like that. So to me, I really, really like it. And I could imagine this one, not all of sports television, but I could definitely imagine this being the main Monday night telecast and having the regular one.
Would you have guests though? Because I like it when it's just Peyton and Eli. I don't care about the guest. I think they do the guests because it's a good way to drum up publicity for whatever. But I like when they're just watching the game and commenting on it as two brothers who really know football.
I like the one where it's like, it was in the fourth quarter. Was that week 1 where they had Russell Wilson and like they were like locked in on the game and he was talking football to them about what was happening in front of them? Like, I thought that was really cool. I could have given up on some of, like, Brett Favre was an all-time bottom 5 guest on any sports show.
But that's been the case for 30 years. Yeah, I draw the line when it's like, oh, here's Kevin Hart. It's like, I'm positive I would just rather watch the football game than hear the Manning brothers talk to Kevin Hart for 50 minutes. But so, Jason, you're the tiebreaker. What do you got?
Well, I'm just glad to hear Bryan hasn't curbed his enthusiasm, because I remember very well a Tuesday in Las Vegas at the beginning of the season. I had gone to the Raiders-Ravens opening night Monday Night Football game, and I had not participated in the Manning cast debut audience because I was at the game. But in my phone that morning was an emergency podcast from Bryan Curtis talking about this as if it were the man walking across the moon. And I think it is sort of a very significant moment for television sports, in the respect that, what was the last time we talked about an in-game production idea? I mean, this has really been a couple generations now of basically the same format. Like, individual personalities come out and they shine. People get excited about a Tony Romo or Aqib Talib, but by and large, it's very recognizable from the thing that you were seeing 40 years ago. And here was something that was a real new spin. I do agree that it's sharper when the two of them are talking together and it isn't reliant on the pre-production bits, because that's the thing that really kind of lags it, I think, when they go like, oh, here's some footage of when you were at Manning camp, or, here's a joke that I remember from something. But it is I think, Bill, when you describe how you are as an audience member for it, I think ESPN will happily take that. The idea that you're going to be an ESPN consumer for a marquee game that you're very interested in, and then a casual fan of a product on ESPN too, that's heaven for them. And like, I know what you're saying, that like the hype around it and the media, excitement over it doesn't necessarily match what the mass audience is for it. But there's a lot of TV like that, lots of it.
The hype was deserved. It was a really cool wrinkle to a format that has basically been stale for 40 years or not really innovated on. And I still feel I'm still pro the Manning thing. I don't want to make it seem like I'm not. I just personally chose not to watch it, but I'm glad it exists, if that makes sense. And I think it's going to pave the way for a lot of different versions of it, most of which will be bad. I think the key part of this is what Bryan laid out. Like, Peyton is so good at it that's what makes this special. And to think you can replicate that with other people, I think is really unrealistic. Like, they're going to try to do it with basketball. It's not going to work.
Bryan, do you think that this is going to be, as Bill said, it'll be imitated for sure. But do you think it'll also be the way that talent, who otherwise would have no interest in the typical model of like getting on the road for 16 games a year or 17 games a year and like traveling around and doing all that, could now have their own sort of bespoke brand that you could kind of spin off of the main product? And that way you could, I don't know, theoretically get a Tom Brady to do, a season of Tom Brady football down the road or something like that.
I think that is actually the key point to all this, and kind of the hidden point. When ESPN announced this, to me, the most interesting thing was that Peyton Manning was producing this. So we were changing the whole way TV hires guys. They weren't hiring an ex-athlete and saying, hey, you're going to go to our production meetings and you're going to do this and you're going to learn to talk like this. The athlete was saying, oh, ESPN, I see you as a place to hang my shingle and produce my content. And by the way, we don't have to wait for Tom Brady because he just did it on ESPN with the Man in the Arena thing.
Great show.
All these athletes are treating, thank you, Bill. All these athletes are treating ESPN, the networks now, not as their employer, but as their co-producer. Like, I'm going to do my thing. And if you want to have my thing on your airways, this is what Jordan did with The Last Dance. Like, we can do it. We're not, I don't work for you. We're partners. And I think that's actually a really interesting thing that's happened with sports television.
Well, and in general, I think that's been the mindset with a lot of this stuff is I'm not a work for hire. If I'm going to participate in this and create IP for you, I want to also be involved in the upside of it. And the Mannings now can take this show on the road if they want. Like, there's been rumors about if Amazon ever gets into football, even beyond what's been rumored, like, could the Mannings just go to Amazon? And would Amazon overpay for the Mannings? And how does that work? And I think the way they did it allows themselves to give flexibility. I will say, I think this would work the most and be the most important. Just the whole secondary screen thing, which, by the way, has been around before the Mannings. To be fair, let's all stop saying the Mannings invented this.
Sure.
Baseball, I think, can be incredibly important for this, and we've seen it. We've seen ESPN dabble in this with college football, where they have the crew that roots for one team and the crew that roots for the other team and the fan things. I think baseball broadcasts are pretty bad. And I say this as I root for a team that's been in a lot of different playoff situations over the last few years. And I think Joe Buck is a very good play-by-play guy. But when you think about how bad the ESPN broadcast has been really over the last 10 years, how much they've struggled with it, and if they could take the same kind of innovation they've done with football, baseball's fucking boring. You're sitting there for 3.5 hours. Like, to think that we're doing it with the same local broadcast where it's like, and there's Jason Gay, he's batting .238. You might remember his father, Bob, was a Cardinals third baseman for 5 years. Oh yeah, Lou, he was some good hitter. Yeah, he really, I remember he could drive a fastball. Oh. 1-0 to Gay. Yeah, I remember. And it's just like, who is this conversation for? What are we doing? Why is this whole alternate language of how we announce a baseball game that doesn't have anything in common with anything else in the world? So anyway, end of rant. I feel like we could make baseball a little better.
First of all, 238 gets me to about 15 million a year, I think, at this point in baseball, if I'm getting enough home runs. But so what you're describing, let's walk this through. Instead of having kind of a neutral, quote unquote, national broadcast, you'd have a split feed where you just take the team from, say the Braves are playing the Red Sox, you take the Braves home announcers and the Red Sox, you put the ESPN umbrella over them for the night through some sort of agreement, and you can just flick to whichever one you want.
Yeah, well, let's say you have a Dodgers game. Maybe you just have two celebrities doing the game. Maybe the celebrities change. Maybe it's like a hang where it's almost like a podcast cross with the game. There's all different ways you could go that would be more interesting than watching A-Rod and whoever announcing a baseball game, I think is my point. I mean, at least let's try some of them before we just get stuck with that for another year.
We have this effectively with the NBA and Major League Baseball already, with the ability to sort of alternate between the broadcasts. So when you're watching the Celtics, will you watch strictly the Boston feed, or will you flip over sometimes to the opposition broadcast to just see what they're saying?
It's funny. I always watch the opposing broadcast because I'm really interested to see what they say about the Celtics. And it's like having somebody come into your house and just start commenting on different things, and you're like, oh yeah, I never noticed that about the chandelier and things like that. But I think there should just I think we should be heading to a world, especially now where you can do stuff remotely, where there should be, I don't know, 4 to 6 feeds for some of these games. Like the BCS, you can't have enough feeds on that. You could do deals with multiple podcast companies, whatever. What do you think, Bryan?
Well, I think you're right, and I think the goal is to find the Peyton Manning of these things, right? We think it's probably Phil Mickelson with golf, who was on the Manning cast and was really good at it and kind of took it over for a quarter and was kind of asking them questions. He kind of, Peyton, you get out of the driver's seat. I got this. He'd obviously been fantastic for golf if he were interested in doing it. And in a Phil broadcast that didn't have the Jim Nance CBS running brooks and flowering plants and had just a little more edge would be fantastic. So but it's hard to find those guys. But that would be the nirvana for any of these sports.
By the way, yesterday was a great example of when you needed the Manning cast. 2 terrible games for different reasons. Bears Raiders was close but was horrific. And then the Vikings Bears game was just grim. Like really kind of like almost sad. And that's where you really needed, like, I could have used Kevin Hart in the second half of that game talking to the Mannings about nothing. But
I was just thinking about those games last night, watching them. Was like, this is the kind of game that the NFL tries to hide on a Sunday schedule. Like just kind of like put it behind a couple of curtains and hope no one sees it. And putting it in prime time really just reveals it for what it is.
Well, Bryan, I've known you for a while now. How many years have we known each other?
10 years at least.
10 years at least. And even before, we'd probably talked even before that, but we've been working together 10 years. One of our favorite things in media is the overreaction to a trend that's seemingly working. When you have a bunch of, maybe not the most inspired thinkers thinking that something is working and quadrupling down on it in the worst possible ways. We're going to see some really bad versions of the Manning cast, and I just can't wait. My fingers are crossed. How about you?
Absolutely. And just think of how many bad ideas ESPN had before the Manning cast. I'm not talking about Monday Night Football. I'm talking about everything.
Yeah.
Just like with a lot of that didn't work. So absolutely. The people that run sports television networks will try and fail to duplicate this, and it will be really, really bad in some cases.